Negotiations can occur in various forms, and the one we will be looking into today is negotiation constituency, also known as negotiating on behalf of someone or even of a group. We have chosen a situation that Hannah has experienced firsthand and one that she will elaborate on in a moment. In this presentation, we will look into the negative aspects of the misalignments of constituency negotiation, the positive use of delegation theory and the principal-agent theory, the representation of the principal by the agents, and argument-based negotiation.
When on work experience in an accounting firm, I observed a meeting between Steph, a human resources employee, and Peter, a partner in the accounting firm. Peter had called the meeting with Steph as he wanted to discuss his personal assistant, Amy. Peter thinks that Amy should be fired as she has repeatedly been late to work, made mistakes in Peter's calendar, and lost important documents. He has complained previously about Amy and believes he simply needs a better assistant as his work is too important to risk these mistakes. His position is wanting a better assistant, and his interest is in maintaining efficiency in his own work. As an HR employee, Steph needs to take on board what Peter is saying, but is also responsible for making sure that Amy is treated fairly and that the problem is dealt with correctly. As Amy is unaware of these complaints and not involved in the meeting, Steph is negotiating on her behalf. Steph's position is to protect Amy's job, and her interest comes from being an HR employee. Steph and Peter need to reach an agreement on how to deal with Amy. Although there are many factors at play in this negotiation, we are going to analyse it with respect to the topic of negotiating on behalf of others, specifically agency negotiation. In this case, Steph is the negotiating agent and Amy is the principal.
So my chosen article was Interest Misalignments in Representative Negotiation. Do pro-social agents fuel or reduce intergroup conflict? So this article explores the negative aspects to constituency negotiation via the various ways in which misalignments can occur. So in particular, it looks at the character of the negotiators, which are either pro-social or not, in order to ascertain conflict or peace. And in this article, a pro-social negotiator will do what's best for the entire team. So the article brings to light that the interests of the representative are not unequivocally aligned with the interests of the represented party, and thus will influence the negotiation. Amy isn't aware of this conflict negotiation, and therefore her interests aren't aligned. Her probable interest would be to stay, however the boss clearly doesn't want her to, so who will be on her side? The article also furthers this notion by saying that the person in question may even have personal preferences more aligned with the opposing group. So Steph has a duty as a HR manager and has loyalty to the company. Peter, by being one of the bosses, might mean that Steph and Peter have more of an allegiance, and with his position in power might influence her. So the implications might be that Amy's just not fairly represented. Because Steph is the HR manager, she has a duty to do what's best for the company and for the workers. She cannot, therefore, in this situation, make both workers happy. Peter doesn't want Amy to work for him. Amy does, we're assuming. So there is a conflict of interest, which means that the person not present, Amy, is just not being represented fairly. The second point that the article makes is that those who are pro-social will be willing or more willing than those who are pro-self-motivated to sacrifice their self-interest in order to benefit their constituency. So Steph is in the HR position, which means she must have more of a global social goal and point of view, versus Peter, who would have a purely self-motivated point of view. He has the issue with Amy. So it would be Steph that would have to give in to Peter's wishes rather than vice versa. And this would therefore mean that in this situation, Peter would get what he wants and Steph will act socially in order to do what's best for the community. So that was that.
Often in agency negotiations, there is separation between the agent and the principal, which can result in the agent misrepresenting the needs and interests of the principal. The article, How Do I Tell You What I Want? Agent's Interpretation of Principal's Preferences and Its Impact on Understanding the Negotiation Process and Outcomes by Kirsten et al., explores this concept. The article analyses how the principal's preferences are visualised and represented by the agent through the use of multi-issue electronic representative negotiations. In the study, principals provided information on their preferences for the negotiation to their agent verbally and with 2 visual representations. The agents were then asked to represent these preferences with a scoring system. The scoring system was then analysed to show how the agent perceives the negotiation and how this may differ from the principal's perception. The article also highlighted possible impacts that inaccurate scoring may have on the negotiation outcome. The results of the study show that when the agents have inaccurately scored the principal's preferences, they negotiate worse, inefficient, and unfair outcomes. For our case, this suggests that Steph is highly likely to misrepresent Amy's preferences for the negotiation. In most cases, agency negotiations begin with a negotiation between the principal and the agent in order to make sure that the agent accurately understands what outcome the principal wants from their negotiation. This article suggests that even when the principal provides this information to the agent verbally and with 2 visual representations, the agent is still likely to misrepresent this information. As Amy has not had a chance to share her preferences with Steph before Steph began her negotiation with Peter, the article suggests that Steph may inaccurately represent what Amy actually wants from the negotiation and cause an inefficient or unfair outcome. For example, if Amy's real interest was to express her dissatisfaction with the company through ongoing non-compliance, then Steph's negotiating to allow Amy to keep her job does not align with Amy's position or interest.
The next article we explored was Argumentation-Based Negotiation, which was published in 2003 in the Knowledge Engineering Review. The article looks at the effectiveness of argumentation-based negotiation and how this approach can allow for more sophisticated interaction between the agents. The article points out that there is a growing amount of research that points to argument exchange, bringing the best quality outcome and increasing the likelihood of coming to an agreement. The article highlights 3 different types of automated negotiation between agents, but concludes that the argumentation-based approach is the most efficient. In a negotiation, there is a conflict of interest, but a desire to cooperate. The 3 traditional approaches to automated negotiation are game theoretic, heuristic, and argumentation-based. These limitations or drawbacks include the following: a lack of information relevant for making comparison between 2 potential outcomes, a lack of resources to acquire this information, and a lack of time to process this information if acquired. Argumentation-based negotiation overcomes traditional limitations of constituent negotiation by allowing agents to argue about beliefs and values or mental attitudes. Other approaches, such as game theoretic and heuristic, assume that the agent's preferences are fixed and that one agent cannot affect the other negotiator's mental attitude. Agents under these approaches can only adjust mental attitudes when new information is given or exchanged, and these 2 approaches assume that no new information is exchanged during the negotiation. In the context of a negotiation, an argument can be viewed as a piece of information that allows the agent to justify a negotiation stance and influence another agent's negotiation stance. This therefore means that when coming to the end of a negotiation, where the outcome is either a success or a failure, and a proposal is given, the agent can offer a critique of the given proposal. Therefore, there is a higher chance of proposing an alternative offer or arrangement and coming to an agreement. Another element that enables the argument to be efficient and determines the outcome of the interaction is the ability of the principal to provide enough information to the agent and having a social element of trust that they will follow their commitments. Now for implications for this case. So Steph is representing Amy in the negotiation with Peter and is acting as her agent. Amy has to provide Steph with enough information for her to have a viable argument in the negotiation. Steph has to be able to convey Amy's beliefs and attitudes to Peter, who will also be arguing his point. The argument-based approach comes into play in the actual negotiation between Steph and Peter. Peter will argue his points as to why Amy must be let go and why she is not an effective assistant, and Steph must argue Amy's side. The argument here then allows for Steph and Peter to discuss why they may disagree to terms and arrangements and allow for them to make other proposals that are more suitable to their situation. Amy must have trust that Steph will stick to her commitments and try to achieve the best possible outcome for Amy.
I had a look at the article Bargaining on Behalf of a Constituent by Hong Bin Sai. This article looks at two different theories in relation to negotiating on behalf of others. It looks at the delegation theory and the principal agent problem. Delegation theory outlines how the act of delegating the task of negotiation from a constituent to a representative can result in a more efficient outcome. Principal agent problem can arise in these situations when there is asymmetric information between the constituent and the agent. Asymmetric information occurs when one party is privy to more knowledge about the situation than the other party. It discusses how the only indication of performance that the constituent has is the outcome. And as they are unable to hear the other party's points, they don't have enough information to assess whether the outcome is truly successful. The big issue with this is that it creates major time lags as the agent and the constituent have to repeatedly go back and forth with their communication, as well as resentment between constituents and representatives. This paper analyzes a negotiation model in which a group of constituents elect a representative to participate in the bargaining process on their behalf. And through this analysis, it concludes that delegating can in fact significantly help the constituents when the representative has more negotiating skills and they are able to overcome the principal agent problem. These findings help us to further understand components of our case study and how those involved can act to reach a positive outcome for both parties. In our study, Amy has unintentionally delegated the negotiation onto Steph, who acts as her representative. This makes it difficult for Steph to act in Amy's best interest, as they have not had a conversation prior to the negotiation, which creates a problem of asymmetric information. In this instance, Steph, the negotiator, has little information about the way in which Amy works and has little to no evidence to back her up as a good worker, meaning she is forced to view Peter's side of the story as the whole picture. Amy is also in the dark about the negotiation, meaning she doesn't have any reason to trust Steph has worked in her favor and doesn't know how strong Peter's argument is. From this research, we believe that the best outcome of this conversation would be for Steph to listen to what Peter has to say before beginning any negotiation, understand the details from his point of view, and then speak directly to Amy. She then needs to build a trusting relationship with Amy, make sure she knows she is working in her best interest and is confident in her negotiating ability. The delegation theory discussed in this article tells us that the use of representatives in the negotiation process is a helpful tool in getting a more efficient outcome. So with the right communication tactics, Steph will be able to help Amy reach a better outcome than she would if she were to negotiate on her own. So that concludes our presentation, and we can confidently say that our research has helped us develop a deeper understanding of the relationships between Amy, Steph, and Peter, and how they can act to ensure a successful negotiation. As Bella explained, misalignment of goals and conflict of interest will result in unfair representation for Amy, and thus the negotiation is at risk of an inefficient outcome. As previously highlighted by Hannah, it is likely that Steph will misrepresent Amy's preferences, especially because she has no way of knowing what her preferences are and what she prioritizes. Jaime looked at the argument-based negotiation and the limitations of traditional negotiation on behalf of constituents. This helps us to see that Steph must get enough information from Amy in order to argue on her behalf. And finally, I explained the research into the delegation theory and the principal agent problem tells us that in order for the best possible outcome